again. I'm going to start us off right now with trying to, I can't see you very well, but I know you're all spread out. So I'm going to have like one thing that's going to do one request that's going to do two things. I want you to go next to someone. I want you to think of them as, oh my God, this is my best friend. And this is the first time I've seen them in 10 years. And I want you to greet them that way and then sit next to them because you're going to be partnering up for the rest of this. So stand up, find somebody. Best friend, haven't seen them in 10 years. Excellent. Very nice. For those of you just coming in, people are reconnecting with their best friends that they haven't seen in 10 years. So stay close to somebody you just came in because you're going to be partnering up. All right. That went really well. Well done. So it extends, right? You kind of just want to continue the experience? Okay. There's so much to catch up on. That's right. Okay. Come back to me. Come back, come back. You can continue the catching up after this, I promise. Okay. That was great. So, you know, for the last day and a half and more, you've been kind of back to back in sessions that have in one way, shape, or form helped you think about how to elevate your enterprise operating system, right? Some new AI approach, some process, some system, some way of doing stuff. Well, for this session, for the next 35 minutes, which is going to go by really, really fast because we're going to do this drive-by thing today, we're going to be focusing 100% on you. We're going to be focusing on your human operating system, arguably the only one that matters, the one in between your ears. Because if that system is buggy, AI is just going to help you fail faster. So I hope I make the case to you that self-awareness is the ultimate skill in the age of AI. So let's start with the idea, or rather with where we find ourselves today on the cusp of the age of AI. As the machine automates the doing and commoditizes the knowing, our value shifts towards one of being. Judgment, regulation, self-awareness. Tomorrow is going to require leaders who can examine themselves as rigorously as they orchestrate and architect their organizations. Leaders who understand the human system that we're bringing to the machine. Because without that understanding, I would argue you're a liability. You cannot design and manage an organization, however, if you don't design and manage yourself first. Therefore, self-awareness is really not a soft skill at all. It's a performance multiplier. It's a risk control. It's a moral compass. And without that, I believe that you are leading on autopilot in a world that requires manual precision. So far, so good? I'm making the case. Okay. So let's start with the premise that, as we go down this journey of self-awareness, that we really don't see the world as it is at all. In fact, I would argue that our chances, the probability of us seeing reality for what it is 0%. There's just too much data out there. And we have very limited perception to capture it all. We miss most of what's out there. We see, and I always have to count the zeros here, we perceive of what we see 0.00035%. That's basically visible light as part of the broader electromagnetic spectrum. That's 1 out of 28,000 data points of what we see, we actually process and we perceive. We perceive 10% of what we hear. I'm looking down to make sure I have the stats right. 0.01% of what we smell, 8% of what we taste, and 16% of what we touch. You put that together across all of our senses, Yeah, the probability is 0. There's too much data out there. And so our brains take shortcuts. In order to make our subjective experience manageable, our brain creates these shortcuts to keep us from getting overwhelmed. But these very shortcuts lock us in to perspectives of crisis, perspectives of fighting for a seat at the table, perspectives of risk. So these perspectives usually don't serve us, and they miss a huge element of reality, huge parts of reality. So if we don't see the world as it is, which I hope I've made a good case for it, I'd argue we see the world as we are. We see the world as our mirror reflected back onto us, ourselves reflected back onto us. So we see the worlds through our mental maps. The structures and organizational structures that we've created through time to be able to make sense of what we're actually perceiving, that data that does come our way and that we do process. We see the world through our mindsets, the assumptions and expectations we bring to the day-to-day that interpret that data that we process. And we see the world through the choices we make about the predictions we have of the world. They don't often feel like choices, but they are. And so the key questions are, what can we learn about ourselves through our experience of the world? Or how can we use our experience, this mirror, to increase our self-awareness? So we're going to do a little exercise, which is why I asked you to more or less pre-partner up. I want you to think of a relationship, the person who triggers you at work, that person who drains you, that person who's just always triggering you in some way. I want you to close your eyes. You got them? All right. Before we break out, because I'm going to tell you my story too, but I want you to really think about, okay, what is wrong with them? Because clearly there's something wrong, right? How are you judging them? What are you thinking about them? What does that look like? And I can't ask you to be real if I'm not, so I'm going to tell you a little story that we're going to carry through. So for me, a few years back, I was passed over for a seat at the table that I had earned and I knew I deserved. But the person who got the job, he was an outside hire, and he was grossly arrogant. He was in your face. He was bold. He was brash. He wasn't collaborative at all. It was all about him. He was moving it so fast and just kind of leaving dead bodies in his wake. And it took a toll on me. And I started kind of accumulating all these data points so that I can kind of bring that together as the steward of the future of our organization, and bring them all together so everybody could see what I saw, which was a massive flaw and a risk. I mean, my cortisol went up, my IQ points literally dropped every time you walked in the room. You know how that goes, right? Because you're so overwhelmed by your trigger. So that's mine. So my label for my guy was grossly arrogant for my trigger, my situation, okay? So now, I want you to turn to your best friend, and I want you to share that label. You're gonna have 90 seconds each, and it's going to go by very fast. I want you to share that label with your partner and the why behind it. Not a massive big story, but what are those things? What are those trigger points? How do they show up? Okay? This is basically, don't be professional. I want you to be honest. I know we're in a professional setting, but just go all in. And share the label and share the why. Ready? Go. If you haven't switched yet, you should. Ten seconds. All right. Let's wrap it up. All right. So, by a show, I know, we really love going down that rabbit hole. With a show of hands, how many of you felt your cortisol go up? Right? Of course, because we are taught and we are perceiving those triggers as stressors, understandably, right? We have that increased cortisol. More than half of you raised your hands. We go into threat mode, fight, flight, flee, and there's a few other F's in there. Like, right, it's an away mode versus a towards mode, and pretty much everything that's good goes down. Our well-being, our creativity, our IQ. Which means that that label that we just put on someone isn't just a thought. It's literally a physiological cue. And we know that when we are threatened in that way, we are far less capable of thinking, let alone leading. But what if we didn't think of triggers as stressors? As I mentioned before, we see the world as we are. What if we were to think about triggers as mirrors? If we shift that. Now, many of you might know, and actually by a show of hands, yes, if we see the world as we are, then what's the lesson into us? That feedback is 65% about the giver. How many of you are aware of that? Some. Think about that for a second. The signal in feedback, there goes your performance management. No, I'm joking. The signal from feedback, 65% about the giver than it is about the receiver. In fact, we can only see in others the traits we ourselves possess. Otherwise, they literally wouldn't register in our self-awareness and our consciousness. When we judge others, we are therefore really projecting parts of ourselves that we have pushed aside, that we have locked away. We quite literally cannot handle in others what we have not already made peace with or have integrated in ourselves. I know, I'm going to let that sit for a little bit. I'm going to continue my story with respect to my mirror, because the moment I stopped and thought about, well, what is it about this guy's arrogance that's bothering me? How could he be my mirror? It just hit me like a ton of bricks. I wasn't angry with his ego. I was angered by his permission. The permission to be bold. The permission to have a voice. The permission to move fast versus triangulating with everybody else at every step of the way. And I had spent the last 10 years of my career being the super collaborative team member and leader, the likable one, the perpetual student. I had disowned my ambition. So my judgment of him was a cry from that part of me that I had kind of pushed aside because that wasn't okay. Are you following? And the moment that I named and I swapped the arrogant self for the ambitious, for me, the ambitious self, the trigger vanished. I realized that I didn't need him to change. I'm the one who needed to change. So I started putting more stakes in the ground. I started taking up space. I started owning my voice. And interestingly enough, that guy who I hated and I despised for so long, he became one of my greatest collaborators because I had finally integrated that part of me that now was able to handle that energy of his. You get the shift? All right, it's your turn. So what can your judgments of others, of your trigger, reveal about you as that mirror? And how can that mirror, that trigger, that person that you just talked about, increase your own self-awareness? Now, it's usually one of three things that's happening here. So triggers and judgments stem from one of three things. Either we have disowned some part of us that we've labeled as bad. We're afraid of becoming something that we've been taught to avoid. Or there's some level of wanting, guilty wanting for something that somebody else has. Some level of guilt behind that. Now, to help you out with this, because I'm going to give you some moments of silence, to help unlock this for you, here are some questions to ask yourself as you unpack what is going on with me. Right? What am I not allowing to exist or I'm afraid of showing? You can see it on here. This is the only part I'm going to read. What belief might I have that this is dangerous or shameful or weak? What might I secretly want that they have? Or what need do I have that's currently being denied? Now, these are some examples. I am not going to read through these, but these are some examples and possible hypotheses of what might be going on if you see the stuff that you might be judging somebody for, showing off, being lazy, being overly emotional, etc., and a hypothesis of what might be happening on the other end. I'm going to give you 20 seconds. I know that's not a long time, but there we go. You're going to sit in silence, and I want you to kind of process for yourself what's going on there, because then I'm going to ask you to turn to your partner again and share. So 20 seconds. What is that for you? So I want you to turn to your partner. I want you to actually face them, make eye contact. This is not a therapy session. It may feel like it. This is a professional coaching session. I want you to lean all in and share with your partner, what is it about you, which is it for you, with the idea that the very part that you're hiding from today may very well be the part that's capping your leadership potential tomorrow. You've got 2 minutes each. I'm going to see if, kind of how it's going. Maybe you need less time. Usually people need more. Go. 30 seconds. Try to wrap it up. All right, come back to me. So, by a show of hands, how many of you stepped into discomfort? Very nice. It's funny, right? It's funny how much energy we spend staying away or trying to avoid that discomfort, trying to keep that part of us away. We talk about exhaustion and burnout, and it takes a lot of energy to do that. Now, one nuance to know as you continue processing this, because this is not going to be a one and done after you leave here. You know, some people are like, well, that person is not worthy of learning from, right? They don't have the same values that I do. No, let's come up. Or some other people say, but how do I learn from them if they're doing all these things that, like, those things are really real, but they really are liars, but they really are. All of those things may be true. It's not about learning from them. It's about learning from yourself in terms of why and how you are triggered by them. Mirror, reflection back. It has arguably nothing to do with them and everything to do with you. Yes? Okay. So we've talked about our triggers and judgments being mirrors. I actually think of them more as a gift, as a gift, because the triggers, the person who's triggering you is quite literally your signpost, pointing you in the direction of, hey, this is your blind spot. This is the part you've been avoiding. This is the part you've locked away. So therefore, it's an invitation from that very part of you that wants to be woven back in, that wants to be integrated, and a path towards reconnecting with your whole self. Ultimately, a catalyst for being conscious and grounded and reflective. That's your human operating system. AI can analyze sentiment left and right, but it cannot do this level of integration. So when you find that shadow and claim it, you stop being a reactive leader and you start being a conscious one. Now, let's integrate it. Let's do this. First, and this is the last part with your partner, I want you to integrate it, or rather name it and give it a voice. What does that look like for you? Is it the selfish one? Is it the arrogant one, right? I named it initially, and then shifted it to the ambitious one. The one who wants to be seen, what is that for you? What is that part? Name it, give it a voice. Then I want you to swap that with compassion and lean into this curiosity. If this part wasn't bad, and therefore worthy to be pushed aside all this time, what could it be doing for me? And then I want you to commit to some small micro shift as a way of, like, small, safe micro way to give this part some space today. So for example, if you labeled somebody as arrogant, maybe you claim a small win. You labeled somebody as lazy, maybe you give yourself the permission to have a small nap or some risk-free space of pause. If you labeled somebody as needy, maybe you ask for help from somebody. You get the swap? You have 3 minutes total. This is the last time you have with your best friend for now. Go. 10 seconds. All right, wrap it up. I know, it goes by fast. So, by a show of hands, how many of you think you can make that micro shift? How many of you think you can make that micro shift today? How many of you think you can make that micro shift this week? Excellent. When you leave, before you leave, make sure you exchange contact information with your best friend so you don't lose track of them for the next 10 years. And so you can hold yourselves accountable to what you just said. Now, we've talked about and we've explored how triggers and judgments and frustrations are an invitation, a mirror, a gift to increase our self-awareness. But what if literally everything were a gift? Everything. I don't know what you believe in, if you believe in the universe, some higher power, whatever. Imagine that the universe, I'm just going to use the word universe, wanted to teach you a lesson. What lesson could only be taught precisely in this way, precisely with this wrapper? It's going to be a shitty wrapper, right? You guys are experiencing that. I'm sorry, I just realized. What could only be taught in this way, in this package, exactly with things being the way they are? What lesson would it be trying to teach you through your experience being exactly what it is right now? What if everything were happening for you, not to you, for your growth, for your evolution, truly for your learning? That's a mindset shift. You know, I'm sure you've heard what we resist persists. What is persisting in your life? And if the world is our mirror, what can that tell us about what we are resisting? Because at first, the universe is going to be like, hey, there's a lesson here. You got it? Oh no, you're ignoring me? You're resisting? You didn't hear me? Oh, you still didn't hear, right? And it just gets louder and louder. That is literally what we resist persists. It's not going to go away. So what can you learn about what's persisting in your life, in whatever facet you have, about what you might be resisting? Now, many of you are going to leave here, and you're going to go back to your very dirty gift. You're going to go back to your toxic colleague, your cut budgets, your failed project. The question is, are you going to be ready to unwrap it? This is your human operating system upgrade. We've gone through all of these today. You now have these tools for yourself and others. Use them. So now what? We've spent the last 30-some minutes going inwards, doing something a little bit weird, self-awareness, all this stuff. What does that have to do with AI again? How does this connect? As self-awareness is the ultimate skill in the age of AI? As you go back and you determine how AI is going to transform how you lead and how you work, AI is the ultimate amplifier. If you lead from an unconscious or triggered place, AI is going to scale the heck out of that. It's going to industrialize your ego at scale. It's going to breathtakingly amplify the wrong decisions at a faster pace across your entire organization. But if you lead from an integrated pace for the leader who understands their shadows and reclaims them, it becomes a force multiplier for clarity and human judgment. You won't just use the data, you're going to see the system. HR is no longer the custodian of culture. We are the architects of human capital, human potential. But you cannot lead others where you yourself have not been. So reclaim those parts of you that you've been pushing aside and hiding. Reclaim your own voice and yourself. Because tomorrow will belong to those leaders who can architect their organizations, rather who can examine themselves as deeply as they need to architect their organizations. Let that be you. Thank you so much, and stay in touch on LinkedIn.